Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 959 VIP Customer. Chapter 959 VIP Customer. Hundreds of eyes immediately turned towards them. Hearing millions would have attracted anyone's attention. Most of them immediately turned their heads away, disinterested. Millions? They must be talking about gold coins, which was impressive for normal people, but tame in the context of New Sparta, where everyone was in the top 1% of the world. The fact that they were talking about sand dollars didn't even cross their minds. Any other denomination would have come up first. The number of sand particles in a handful, the number of fishes in a lake, etc. But definitely not sand dollars. Venerable Kyo? Are you telling the truth? Jasper muttered. Yes, I am serious. That's the reason why I came here in the first place. Jodan, you bragged about selling as many Godforge pieces as you can. Now's your chance to prove it. Both Jodan and Jasper knew that the Thunderfoot Company was the only company capable of selling large amounts of Godforge pieces. But 7 million? Even they didn't think they could sell that much in one single transaction. To prove his intention, Michael summoned his shadow in front of their feet, before a treasure chest emerged from the tenebrous darkness. The chest opened with a click, showcasing an almost overflowing mound of sand dollars inside. Both of them were blinded by the sight. Jasper immediately slammed the chest shut before any other customer saw such a sight. Now, people here usually weren't prone to violence, but the tantalizing sight of millions of sand dollars would definitely motivate some people to act nefariously. He didn't want to burden that on Kyo, who had now proven his worth to be a VIP customer. I have verified your wherewithal, Jasper said, trying his best to stay calm. I can't believe you have that. Jasper covered the guy's mouth, causing his words to come out muffled. That's too much. Does being a historian really pay that much? Michael didn't answer, giving no indication as to how he earned his money. On the other hand, Jasper acted with propriety, not asking any questions and simply doing what a butler should do. Serve. Venerable Kyo, with that much money, you will be able to purchase 700 kilograms of Godforge pieces. Ahem. I won't be able to carry that much by myself, so I hereby mandate you to enter into our warehouse. Jasper opened the door behind him, guiding Michael and Jodan inside. At least in there, nobody would be able to hear their conversation. Michael was led inside what looked to be an underground giant mining space. It didn't look like the temple at all, with dark granite stones surrounding them from all sides. Please follow me, Jasper said, walking forward with an oil lamp mysteriously in his hand. With the butler walking on forward, Jodan took this chance to drag Michael behind to ask him some questions. You didn't tell me you were rich. You're practically a conglomerate. Well, you're kinda right. You also didn't tell me why you wanted me to lie to Jasper. Jodan pursed his lips, looking forward to seeing the butler already far off ahead of them. Truthfully, I wanted to talk to you alone, and this warehouse is the only place that is completely free from surveillance. From your enemies? No, from my father. He doesn't want anyone outside of the family knowing about our circumstances. Michael raised his eyebrows. Is he talking about the incident they were talking about earlier? In the distance, they heard the sound of crackling as the lambent light of a giant fire from further down the tunnel lit the entire place a warm orange. Jodan walked forward, and Michael followed behind. Something was stolen from us this morning, Jodan confessed. I can't tell you what it is, but it is vital to the continuation of our company. Without it, we would slowly degrade into obscurity. They continued walking, coming closer to the end of the tunnel where Michael saw a bright light almost blinding his view. Who stole it? We don't know. They moved like the shadows, disappearing out of our sights before we could even catch up. They struck us hard and fast, bypassing all of our security like it was nothing. They seemed to know all of our patterns and routines. This was definitely planned months before this. As Michael listened to Jotan's explanation, he couldn't help but feel that it was very similar to a recent event. The elves, the vandals, a sudden siege. Could the ersatz have attacked the Thunderfoot Company? But why? Our family is currently doing everything they can to retrieve this object, Jodan said, his doubt betrayed by his eyes. Why are you telling me this? Jodan stopped just as they were about to exit the mining tunnel. Then he looked at Jadon. I've always been special. Perceptive, they called me. I always know when someone can solve a problem that is afflicting me. It's weird. Some kind of prescient ability, the priest said. It's like I could see how much a person would be able to affect the future, like a storm brewing in the skies. And when I saw you enter into the soiree, I saw something I have never seen before. A super typhoon. Calamity. I've never seen anything like it. From then on, I knew that there was something special with you. I just didn't know it. And it wasn't until this morning that I realized why my ability showed me that vision. I need your help. I think that you're the only person that can help our family retrieve that object. Michael stared at Jadon, completely shocked at the man's revelation. He immediately looked at Jadon's identity screen again. Jadon. Realm. 6th stage body formation realm. Ability power. Perceptive eye. This ability power allows its user to sense the future effects of someone's power. When Michael first saw Jadon's ability, he thought it only allowed him to see attacks ahead of time. But as it turned out, it also worked as some kind of prophetic vision. Chapter 960 Thunderfoot Secret. Chapter 960 Thunderfoot Secret. You want me to help your family? Michael asked. Yes, I think so. How? Jadon stuttered for a little bit before saying, I don't know. But I feel that you're someone with special abilities. The fact that you can so casually purchase 7 million sand worth of Godforge pieces is proof of that. I'm certain that being a historian doesn't pay you that well. Michael had to hand it to the guy. Jadon was perceptive, despite his unserious and talkative nature. In truth, Jadon probably went to the exact person who could help them solve this problem. If Michael's guess was correct, then Ersatz was behind this heist on the Thunderfoot Company. It made too much sense. The Ersatz Company's life goal was to eradicate everything there was to do about the ancient era. And the Thunderfoot Company was contributing to exactly the opposite of that goal. They were distributing and selling Godforge pieces, something that, according to Katerina, was instrumental in recreating the conditions in the ancient era. So, it was only natural that the Ersatz did something to disrupt their business. But it's still not for certain, he reminded himself. I don't even know what the Ersatz stole from the Thunderfoot Company. I don't even have a single clue on how I'm going to retrieve it, or if I should even do it. What was stolen? Jadon opened his mouth, but chose not to say anything instead. If I don't know what was stolen, I won't be able to find it. You understand that, right? Frustrated at himself, Jadon nodded. I know, but it's just too sensitive. This involves the entire Thunderfoot family. Young Master? Venerable Kyo. Just then, Jasper's voice called out from the end of the tunnel, forcing their conversation to a halt. Ugh. Fine, I'll tell you. But I think it would be better to show you. Jadon walked forward and Michael followed behind him. They both entered into the bottom of a mineshaft, with hundreds of meters of excavated stone walls surrounding them from all sides. Welcome to our warehouse. Jasper bowed to Michael, the light from his oil lamp illuminating the thousands of soil mounds lined up on the ground. It looked like a graveyard. These soil mounds were about 3 feet tall and 6 feet in diameter, and they littered the bottom of the mineshaft in perfect rows and columns. What is this? Jadon cleared his throat. This is where we store our Godforge pieces. Michael opened his drone vision, suddenly seeing the entire abandoned mineshaft with blinding orange light. Underneath these soils, he could see ability power just waiting to burst out into the open and release the purifying white fire into the world. Wait, how are they not destroying everything they touch? Is that what the soil is for? But it's just ordinary soil. How is it not burning? Only Damascus steel or mithril could contain the holy and destructive white fire that the Godforge pieces unleashed. Other metals or organic materials would simply be incinerated into their base elemental mana atoms, with the only exception being human hearts. Wait! Jadon nodded, awkwardly nodding his head. Yep, you're seeing it right. There are corpses under those mounds of soil. Michael was so blinded by the ability power that the Godforge pieces were emanating, that he didn't even notice what was surrounding them. They were human bodies. Now, before you say anything, we didn't kill any of them, Jadon said immediately before a misunderstanding arose. They're already dead, and we purchased these cadavers for a very reasonable price. Like, for science. But why? Michael wondered. With your resources, you could easily purchase container boxes that can store Godforge pieces. It relates to the secret of the Thunderfoot family. Truthfully, we are... Jasper started, immediately warning the young master from saying too much. It's okay, Jasper. You can trust Kyo. He's the one that's going to help us retrieve the key. The Thunderfoot butler still wanted to say something, but Jadon immediately began to explain. In truth, we are descendants of an ancient family, one that stretches back to the ancient era. Michael raised his eyebrows. So, you're related to ancient humans? But aren't we all? Jadon shook his head. Well, you're right. But most of everyone's history's lineages have been erased during the Great Cataclysmic Event. But not us. We are the only ones who were able to keep a record. This was a tremendous revelation. He couldn't believe that such a normal, run-of-the-mill company turned out to have such an important connection to ancient history. So you know your great ancestor? Michael asked, half joking. Yeah, I do. He was a farmer for a royal family, but that's not important. It's not just our historic lineage that is preserved, but also our heirlooms, our family secrets. Our ancient ancestors left for us a great inheritance, one that allowed us to obtain as many Godforge pieces as we want. Just requires Sue drops. Michael frowned, completely confused. Huh? So you can obtain as many Godforge pieces as you can in exchange for Sue drops. What does that have to do with the cadavers buried in soil? Jadon's face twisted into a grimace. It's very hard to explain in words. Jasper, can you please take out the lamp? Jasper's eyes bulged. There was a vehement refusal in his gaze. Young master, I sincerely hope that you know what you are doing. Our family has kept this secret for thousands of years without anyone knowing. We didn't do that by telling strangers about our heirloom. But Jadon shot back a look at Jasper. Trust me. Who do you think figured out how the lamp worked? Me, right? With those words, Jasper had no response. It was only recently that they were able to figure out how their heirloom lamp worked. And it was all because of the young master's unique instincts. All right, Jasper acceded. He raised his hand, making some hand signs as he used his ability power to release the hidden defensive mechanism inside the mineshaft. Chapter 961 Lamp. Chapter 961 Lamp. Large, horizontal pillars emerged out of the walls, forming a sort of Jenga-esque collection that formed up to the top of the mineshaft. Michael saw ability power threads controlling these pillars. Ability power that was beyond the body formation realm. It wasn't long before a sudden change happened in the air. There was a palpable pressure permeating the entire mineshaft. It was subtle, but it was there. It felt like there was a very thin, diaphanous sheet of silk wrapping around his entire body. He looked up, seeing the source of that strange power. The pillars then moved back into their positions in the walls, locking into place as if they were never cut in the first place. What was left in the air was what looked to be an ordinary oil lantern. Except, there was no fire inside. But that didn't seem to stop the lantern from emanating a red light that painted the entire mineshaft a warm crimson environment. This was our heirloom. We call it the red lamp. Any Godforge piece that is near the light of this lamp can duplicate itself. Michael jolted. What? Yes, Jadon answered. Godforge pieces under the influence of the red lamp will be able to grow its own mass as if it was a crop. Only, Godforge pieces need a drop of Sue in order to grow. Although Jadon explained it to him, Michael still couldn't quite wrap his head around what he was saying. Godforge pieces can be grown? That simply didn't make sense. It was impossible. Of course, only Godforge pieces that are out in the open can be eligible to grow. Those that are in a living person's heart will not be affected, as well as Godforge pieces that are trapped inside container boxes. That's why we use cadavers. Fresh ones. If we don't, Godforge pieces will just burn through to the bottom of the earth, leaving the red lamp's zone of influence. Still, Michael was not convinced. It wasn't that he believed Jadon to be a liar, but the premise of this whole thing seemed bogus from the get-go. I can't believe it until you show me how it works, he said. Jasper shook his head in disappointment. Unfortunately, Venerable Keo, we can't. The key to the red lamp is missing. It's been stolen. This red lamp needs the key to work, Jadon explained. Without it, the Godforge pieces won't grow no matter how many Sue drops we put into the soil. So now you understand why everyone is so frantic. Without that key, we won't be able to produce any more Godforge pieces in the meantime. By our estimation, our stockpile will run out before the end of the year. But that's not the only reason why we're so rattled by the heist. How did they know about the key? The key was the only thing stolen. They could have robbed numerous other, more valuable artifacts in the Thunderfoot compound, yet they only took this key. Whoever they were, they must have known about the key's special importance. If so, they would have also stolen the red lamp. It was possible that they might not have known about its actual use, but they knew that it was important to the Thunderfoot Company and their uncanny ability to keep selling Godforge pieces when everyone else was struggling to get even a few kilograms. Michael had no words. He might not believe the red lamp's ability to spontaneously grow new Godforge pieces, but he was starting to believe its importance. If the ersatz were interested in them enough, then perhaps it was true. It would explain how the Thunderfoot Company could sell hundreds of kilograms of Godforge pieces without batting an eye. I guess, if it's an heirloom from the ancient era, it would make sense. Despite his skepticism, he was now fully on board with the idea of retrieving the key. He needed to take it back from the ersatz. Their plans cannot come to fruition. All right, I'll help you with the key, Michael declared. This sent joy and relief to Jadon. Oh, thank the gods. Really? That's great, Jasper. The butler still didn't know how the historian's protege could help them with the retrieval of the key, but he didn't question it. What should I do? Do we go and use advanced detective techniques to track down the thieves? Jadon asked, excited like a golden retriever. Michael shook his head. Nope. We'll do nothing. What? These guys are professional. You won't find a trace of them. At most, you'll see that they covered themselves in an all-dark outfit with a hood. Right, Jasper? Surprised, the butler nodded. Yes. How did you know that? Michael nodded. You're not the first one they've attacked, he said. For now, we can't do anything. Unlike the incident with Lyra's kidnapping, they didn't have a convenient picture to point them in the exact location of the stronghold. But he had other plans. Give me the 700 kilograms of Godforge pieces, he said, manifesting the chest back in front of them. Certainly, Jasper said, hurrying to retrieve the Godforge pieces stored in the mounds of soil. Perhaps Kyo really could help them with the retrieval. Will you use it to lure them out? Will this help with catching those guys? Michael shook his head. No. I'm going to give this to my guys who can. Perhaps it was now the best time to truly turn the shadows of Reborn into a force worth looking out for. 700 kilos ought to be enough. Jasper, with utmost speed, collected all 700 kilos of Godforge pieces in 70 container cubes, giving it to Michael, who stored them in his shadow inventory. Then Michael turned to Jadon. Meet me in the archery competition. Really? I wasn't even planning on going there because of the robbery. They're going to be there, Michael said, his implication heavy. Hearing this, Jadon immediately nodded his head and agreed. How about you? I'm going to deliver these. You go on ahead. Chapter 962, Bequeathing Shadows. Chapter 962, Bequeathing Shadows. Michael arrived back in the nation of Reborn. But what welcomed him wasn't the sunny, overly bright, and usually positive scenery of the paradise in the desert. Instead, he found himself in an extremely dark room. Stygian. The only form of illumination in the room was the lambent light coming from the flickering candles attached to the walls. Naruto Sasuke, are you all here? He asked. And in front of him, the figures of the two shadow orc chieftains arose from the darkness. They kneeled in front of him. Just as you commanded, they both recited. Is this an urgent matter, Lord Michael? You usually don't visit our shadow realm? Asked Naruto, his werewolf-like fur alert. This shadow realm was simply what they called their hideout, located very deep on the bottom of the nation of Reborn. It was so deep that the only way to get inside here was through the shadow teleportation inherent in all shadow orcs. Are you having some trouble in New Sparta? We've heard that the Thunderfoot company that you visited is currently embroiled in a thieving problem, said Naruto, his quill spines ready. Michael nodded, impressed at the orcs' information-gathering skills. Yes, you are right. It involves the Thunderfoot. We are now tasked in helping them find the item stolen from them and demand recriminations. I added that last part. The two orc chieftains tensed their bodies, not letting their excitement get in the way of Lord Michael's words. They furtively glanced backwards, towards the ocean of shadows, silently watching from afar. With a single look, they already warned their orc soldiers to be ready for the mission that they were about to partake in. Hundreds of eyes opened in the darkness, nodding. Their excitement was palpable. I realize that I haven't been making use of your abilities as you would all like to, Michael said. And for that I am sorry. Naruto started. Please do not apologize, Lord Michael. It is our incompetence that should be blamed. The world that you currently delve in is something that our shadows cannot overcome. Sasuke grimaced. But we will do everything we can to help you in any kind of way. The hundreds of shadow orcs behind them grunted, their eyes showing fervent resolve. Don't worry. I have noticed your efforts, my shadow orcs. And now, it is time for me to reward you with something that I know you all yearn for. Michael raised his hand, a shadow forming in front of his feet. With a single gesture, drops of white, flaming drops appeared in the air. Godforge pieces. The shadow orcs held their breaths, their excitement breaking the silence and solemnity of their hideout. Lord Michael, are you? Michael nodded with a smile. That's right. I am bequeathing Godforge pieces. Naruto began slamming his fists into his own chests, shouting his tribe's incinerating roar. And for a second, Michael felt as if a true werewolf was standing right in front of him. Sasuke didn't lag behind. He crossed his arms, reaching into the sharp quills on his shoulders, and began to strum them like a guitar. The two orc chieftains' tribal rituals would ordinarily sound discordant and disharmonious, jarring even. But the zeal, excitement, and fierce loyalty they felt for the man in front of them created a melodic duet that made one's blood boil with excitement and hair-raising anticipation. Michael flicked his hand, and the drops of flaming Godforge pieces shot towards the two orc chieftains. They wholeheartedly received this gift, the Godforge pieces entering into their hearts and changing their lives from here on after. How do you feel? I feel a void, Lord Michael. It's dark and lonesome, like my shadow. Comforting. Naruto muttered as he savored the new power beating alongside his heart. It's the same for me. It's a chasm, but like a dark sea. I can see myself traversing through the space and reaching the power in the distance. Michael nodded, then set his sights on the sea of shadows just watching them from afar. They were bubbling. He could feel their anticipation from here. Elite penumbras. Come forth, he commanded. And in an instant, 10 shadows formed in front of him. The elite penumbras were a subgroup within the shadow orcs who were considered to be the best of the best, below only that of the chieftains themselves. You have all proven yourselves worthy of becoming magnetics. Last I heard, you defeated a warlord in their sleep and prevented a war that would have cost thousands of lives. He flicked his hand, bestowing upon them their own Godforge pieces. The 10 elite penumbras staggered as the white, flaming drops shot through their chests. Almost immediately, they felt the sheer power of ability powers now coursing through their heart, making them drop to their knees. They didn't take to the Godforge pieces as well as Naruto and Sasuke, he noticed. High penumbras, step forth, he commanded. 1,000 eyes looked up at him with surprise. It took them a hot second before they appeared from the sea of darkness in the room and presented themselves in front of Michael. They didn't think they would be called upon. Of course, the chieftains were bequeathed Godforge pieces. They were chieftains not only in name but in ability as well. The High Penumbras were a close second. But High Penumbras as well? You are a group of orcs that have shown grit, skill, and power. You are the backbone to the shadows of Reborn. Receive your gifts. A large shadow formed in the ground, before hundreds upon hundreds of flaming white Godforge pieces floated upwards. Then, with a flick, these drops shot towards the large group of 1,000 shadow orcs. Immediately, the orcs that received their Godforge pieces dropped to the ground, clutching their chests in pain. It took more effort from them to assimilate this new power into their bodies. And curiously, some of the orcs received theirs while some didn't. The Godforge pieces seemed to choose their own wielders, ignoring those who they didn't deem worthy. Chapter 963 Penumbras. Chapter 963 Penumbras. Out of the 1,000 high penumbras in the room, only 300 were able to receive their Godforge pieces. Originally, Michael planned on using 500 of his 700 kilos of Godforge pieces. He would reserve the 200 kilos for him, the Dragonborns, and Fudge. However, even when he commanded the Godforge pieces to randomly shoot towards an orc, they seemed to choose their own path and shoot towards an orc who they deemed more worthy. Why? Is it because they're more talented while some are not talented enough? He looked through the talents of the chosen orcs and unchosen ones. Most of them were A-class, some B-class. He would have thought that only the better talented orcs would get chosen, but he was wrong. Some of the A-class orcs didn't get chosen, while a few B-class got lucky enough to be selected. As he looked at the orcs now assimilating the Godforge pieces, it started to make sense. Naruto and Sasuke, the orc chieftains, basically breezed through the process, feeling no discomfort or pain at all. While the elite Penumbra orcs experienced some discomfort, it seemed bearable enough to stand. But the high shadow orcs, on the other hand, couldn't bear the pain of assimilating their Godforge pieces. They laid on the ground, feeling as if their hearts were burning from the inside. The Godforge pieces know who can and can't handle it, he realized. If those unchosen orcs were given Godforge pieces now, Michael had a feeling that they would experience a pain unlike anything they've ever faced before, or worse, death. After a bit more thought, Michael had a theory as to why this happened. It was basically a physical assessment test. Becoming a magnetic is not only a supernatural change, but also a physical one. To advance through the realms, one would have to take on more and more kilograms of Godforge pieces in their heart. Of course, Michael knew that the criteria wasn't just a simple question of how fit you are, but it was a factor as well as their skill, talent, and their mentality. The orc chieftains easily handled it because of their experience of being a leader. The elite Penumbra orcs handled it well thanks to their tremendous skill. They wouldn't be in their position if they weren't. Some were better than others, and they were the ones that received a Godforge piece. Rejoice if you have been chosen, Michael announced to the room. It is both a privilege and a responsibility. The power that you will obtain can change reality itself. After a few more seconds, the high shadow orcs that had been struggling on the ground finally found balance within their hearts. Slowly, they stood up and relished in the new power just waiting to be released from their hearts. Michael felt all kinds of emotions in the room. Excitement, vigor, jubilation, and sadness. The orcs who didn't receive their own Godforged pieces could only silently wallow in their sadness while their counterparts celebrated. As for those unfortunate, do not lose hope, Michael said to every single orc in the room. You will receive your Godforged pieces in due time. Once you have proven yourselves worthy to the Godforged pieces, to your fellow orcs, to me, and most of all to yourselves. Michael turned to the orc chieftains. Naruto, Sasuke, I will leave some Godforged pieces in your care. Once your orcs have proven themselves with great merit, then feel free to distribute it to them as a reward. This includes you and the high penumbra orcs. If you can advance through the stages, then do so without limit. Michael's announcement sent an unprecedented excitement within the entirety of the Shadow Orc organization. Biututu, Ratata. The thousands upon thousands of Shadow Orcs watching from a distance could only bellow out their excitement upon Michael's words. They were motivated now more than ever to become a better shadow than before, untouchable and imperceptible. They wanted that Godforged piece no matter what. Biututu, Ratata. Those that received Godforged pieces were excited as well. They could feel an entity within their hearts, just waiting to burst out. And they would work even harder to reach the realm that the Dragonborns had long been in. Biututu, Ratata. Naruto and Sasuke bellowed out their tumultuous roars. For too long, their shadow organization had been kept to the sidelines while their peers advanced further than they could even see. They were only a disembodied shadow, a fly on the wall who could only watch everything from afar without being able to do anything at all. Sometimes, they couldn't even be a shadow amongst those talented magnetic monsters. They pained to see the Dragonborns unaided in New Sparta and Metropolis. They pained to see Lord Michael struggling to advance Reborn's cause by himself without help. But no longer. With this new power, their shadow would no longer be a disembodied spectator in the wall. They would become pillars underneath the light of Reborn. Biututu, Ratata. Michael felt a change in the air. A bomb. No, a shockwave of ability power. His eyes were inundated with threads of ability power fraying in the air, connected to none other than the shadow orcs right in front of him. His heart beat faster. The fervent body slamming, quill strumming, and tumultuous shouting only increased the power that was building up within these orcs. The invisible shockwave of power continued to pulse, becoming faster, more powerful. That's... Figures made out of a misty shadow began to form above Naruto and Sasuke's head. Divas. The orc chieftains were actually awakening their divas right at this very moment. Without premeditation, without warning, and without an emotional release. And it wasn't just them. Shadowy divas began to form above the 10 high penumbra orcs as well. Chapter 964 Expensive Colosseum. Chapter 964 Expensive Colosseum. Above the two orc chieftains, Michael saw the beginnings of a figure clad entirely in a tenebrous shadow. It bore the same size and shape as the orc themselves, with Naruto's diva as a shadowy orcanine with an intimidating figure, and Sasuke's diva as a Stygian orcupine with numerous quills. And even though their divas looked similar to each other, the power that they were emanating was completely different to one another. Like apples and oranges. But like two sides of the same coin, their powers were somehow complementary to each other, one covering the other's backs. Naruto. Realm. First stage body formation. Ability power. Clap of the Devil Orc. This ability power allows its user to create a booming slapping sound using their body as their instrument. Those who hear this sound will be subject to the user's blinding, deafening, and disorienting effects. Sasuke. Realm. First stage body formation. Ability power. Strike of the Devil Orc. This ability power allows its user to create shadowy quills that pierce through its target and deal tremendous damage. The effects of the quills are enhanced if the target cannot see or sense the quill coming. Poetically, the two frequently clashing orc chieftains had ability powers that perfectly complemented each other. They were powerful if used by themselves, but overpowering if used together. Meanwhile, the 10 elite penumbra orcs began forming their own divas as well. And just like their chieftains, their divas were made out of a misty Stygian shadow that almost mirrored their own bodies, but with a little bit more heft. Their ability powers were varied, but all had something to do with their species as either an orcupine or an orcanine. One used their quills and the other their immense physical strength. So this is what it feels like to be a magnetic, Naruto muttered under his breath. It is a refreshing feeling, isn't it, brother? Today was such a special occasion that both orc chieftains tolerated each other quite well, and maybe even had the semblance of being comrades or even friends. Now normally, I would have advised all of you to work hard and train for a couple of weeks before you started to try and awaken your diva. But I see now that you don't have to, he said with a smile. It looked like the shadow orcs would be quite useful earlier than he thought. In fact, they could actually already be deployed in New Sparta, searching for the strongholds there. But of course, first things first. He needed to find the key that Erzatz stole from the Thunderfoot Company. He turned to the Shadow Orcs. "Get used to your powers fast," he said to them. "Because you're going on a mission." Naruto, Sasuke, and the rest of the Shadows of Reborn immediately kneeled in front of him, showing both reverence and gratitude. "For Reborn," they shouted. Michael teleported himself back in New Sparta, into a secluded corner in the boundary between the two quadrants. Immediately, he felt the change in energy of the entire territory. Lots of footfalls, coming from excited spectators, to opportunistic vendors, and everything in between. Today was the actual celebration of the lunar celebrations, the archery competition. To honor this joyous day, the Draconians graciously agreed to let the competition take place into their quadrant. An arena was specifically created for the sole purpose of all the inhabitants of New Sparta being able to participate in the celebrations. Eventually, Michael found himself walking amongst large, towering spires that covered the entire horizon. Draconians made these their homes, containing all of their hoarded treasures. Ordinarily, this would have been the perfect place for thievery to flourish, especially with the lax security due to the celebrations, but no one would dare to blatantly rob the infamous Draconians. They would be signing their own death sentence. Michael didn't even think that the Erzatz would dare do that. "Look, that arena is huge. I wonder how much they spent to get that made. It must have been in the billions. How are they not broke?" With the Draconians helping the funding, that would never happen. A giant, rectangular coliseum stood proudly among the Draconian towers. Massive would be an understatement. By ChatJK5's estimation, it could easily house hundreds of thousands of people at a time. Basically, everyone in New Sparta could find their own seats there. "It's made by magic," Michael observed. "It must have taken thousands upon thousands of mages to create that thing in so little time." That was where the budget was primarily for, which Michael thought was a little bit inefficient. If they had used cement and concrete instead, the whole thing could have been made with less than $1,000 in total. And in half the time too. Unfortunately, no one knew about his miracle concrete when they first created this coliseum. Hopefully that would change soon. He walked inside the tall archways, jostling through hundreds of people clamping to get inside. Thankfully, he didn't have to tussle with the crowd for long. He found his way towards a secluded staircase by the side, completely devoid of an excited crowd. The guards refused entry to all of them. Michael towards the werewolf guards, presenting his metal nameplate from the soiree. "Can I enter?" The werewolf sniffed the metal, before nodding. "Sir Kyo, please head up to your designated viewing area. You will find yourself in familiar company." Permitted, he headed up. "How is that guy allowed up there?" "I actually heard his name. He's Kyo, the professor's protege." "Professor Lichtenstein's only student?" Their surprised shouts diminished as Michael reached the end of the stairs, leading to an ornate doorway. He pushed it open, and Michael felt a sense of déjà vu from last night. Multiple eyes turned towards him as he made his entrance. But this time, their gazes lingered with amazement and awe. His reputation went even above that of the legacies, almost reaching the conglomerates, who were all already sitting in their seats at the end of the room. "Kyo, over here." Jadon waved towards him. Chapter 965 Team Brownbloods. Chapter 965 Team Brownbloods. The seats in the view deck were separated by tables, just like they were in the soiree. At the very front, watching the center of the arena in full view, were the conglomerate representatives. Gabriel, Cedric, and the three others. They took the entire front row, as they had their own company with them, who were all presumably part of their respective conglomerates. The table Jadon was waving him over was just behind that exact table. And curiously enough, sitting opposite him was none other than Una Montgomery. Their eyes met as he walked closer, and she immediately tapped the chair beside her, prompting him to take a seat near her. "Thanks," she said to him. "For the gift, dummy. I really appreciate you creating that by hand. It shows how much you care," she said, leaning her head on her hand. Michael rubbed his slightly reddish nose. Of course. He wanted to say that this should have been natural, for she deserved only the best. But he couldn't quite get those corny words out of his mouth. "Kyo, have you done the thing?" Jadon asked, interjecting the moment between the two reincarnators. Michael nodded. "Yep. Don't worry about it," he assured the worrisome Jadon. "I have my people already working on it behind the scenes. Just enjoy the show. That's the best way to catch them off guard." Una turned to him, her inquisitive eyes trying to discern the nature of their conversation. He looked away. He didn't want to involve her in the matters regarding Erzatz just yet. "Ah, the prodigious historian." Michael turned forwards, seeing Gabriel Vanderbilt turned towards him. Their tables were very near each other. "I told my family about you last night, and they are very interested in meeting you over a cup of tea." Even though Gabriel's voice wasn't that loud, His voice traveled throughout the entire room. Their eyes were glued to their interaction. Were they witnessing the moment that a historian joined the leagues of conglomerates? But instead of celebrating at the opportunity like most people would, Michael's reaction was quite lukewarm. I appreciate that. But do they want to meet with me or my professor? Gabriel staggered. He couldn't find the right words for a few seconds. I apologize. You're right. Professor Lichtenstein's presence is widely coveted in our circle. We heard he was visiting New Sparta, but he is nowhere to be seen. He's off studying a new artifact, he lied. He is infamous for his disregard for anything except for artifacts. But no matter, our offer still stands. Becoming acquainted with you is still a high honor that I would deeply appreciate. Michael scoffed to himself. He wasn't in the mood to visit the Vanderbilt estate yet. No thanks. Gabriel nodded. I understand. But, can I ask just one question? Why are you still wearing your mask? He was the only one still wearing the mask from last night. A mighty lion with a proud mane. I don't want to show my face, he said truthfully. The ersatz could be here in this Colosseum. After knowing that they had a stronghold hidden here in New Sparta, he was almost 100% certain that their spies were somewhere around here, watching the spectacle amongst civilians. And just to be sure, he even changed his own facial structure behind the mask just in case. Of course, with his defenses, they wouldn't even be able to get anywhere close to him, but he had to be safe. Well, that's a shame. I'm sure there are lots of eligible ladies who would want to see your face. Neytiri elbowed him in the ribs, before winking to Yuna. Instead of worrying about others, you should worry about the archery competition. It's about to start, Neytiri said, pointing at the center of the Colosseum. Michael peered through the viewing deck, seeing a large open field at the bottom of the staircase-like sitting area. The purveyor werewolf tribe stood at the center, their chieftain making some announcements to the crowd. Michael couldn't hear anything from all the tumultuous screaming of hundreds of thousands of spectators around the Colosseum. Thankfully, he had his drone. He deployed one of his mini-drones to listen in on the chieftain. The rules were simple. The werewolf tribes and their human allies will be going through a single elimination tournament bracket. The seeding for the fights was completely random and drawn by each tribe's chieftain ahead of time. And just like discussed during the soiree, the conglomerates will send their own representatives in the tournament to test the level of capability within the competition. This was what got the crowd going, as this was the first they'd heard of this new addition. The competitors, on the other hand, felt more pressure. If they got the short end of the stick and matched with the conglomerates, they could get eliminated from the first round. Even the winner favorites had to cross their fingers for that to not happen. Our representatives are strong, but there are some great contenders out there, said Cedric. Those legacies have a great chance of giving us a run for our money. Would you like to bet on that? Gabriel asked with a smile. Cedric shook his head. In his heart, he knew they would win. He was just being nice. Then Gabriel turned towards Michael. How about you, Kyo? Do you have a werewolf tribe that you'll cheer on? Michael nodded. The Brownbloods. Curious by his answer, the 5 conglomerates peered down and searched the tribes. I'm not familiar with them, Cedric said. They are not strong in archery, and I don't think they've allied themselves with anyone competent with the bow. They have, Michael responded. The Reborn Company. Question marks appeared above their heads. Even the people eavesdropping on their conversation were left confused. The Reborn Company? They seem to have heard of that name somewhere. And you're confident that the Reborn Company will shore up the weaknesses of the Brownblood werewolves? Why? Kyo turned towards Cedric. Because I'm in the Reborn Company. Chapter 966 Fortune Not the Fangs. Chapter 966 Fortune Not the Fangs. Everyone turned to him, surprised at his revelation. As the only prodigy of the illustrious Professor Lichtenstein, they thought that Kyo would have followed his lead of being unbridled by any affiliation, focusing simply on his studies. And if he did have a company, they would have thought it would have a much more recognizable name. A company just below the level of conglomerates at the very least. The Reborn Company? Forgive me, I'm not familiar with that name. Do they go under a different name? Are they perhaps a sub-company of another one? Gabriel vocalized everyone's questions. And before Michael could answer his question, someone else did. They are a company based in the Lower Queens region, Alaric interjected. Sir Kyo, I didn't think you were part of that. Are you perhaps acquainted with their leader? He nodded. Michael is currently on a mission. The conglomerates looked towards a certain table in the room. A table filled with companies based on the current reigning top territory, Metropolis. They had a weird energy among them. And it wasn't just them. The other people here also reacted quite strongly when they heard the name Reborn. What's interesting was that the reactions were quite mixed. Some were indifferent, some were surprised, and some were scoffing. Looks like we're out of the loop here, Cedric muttered. He then waved his hand in the air, and suddenly, a shadowy figure flashed in front of him. A distinguished, well-dressed butler appeared right in front of Cedric, leaning in to whisper in his ear. Having finished his job, the butler leaned back and disappeared into a blur. I see. I understand now the ambivalence towards the Reborn company. Looks like they made quite an entrance in Metropolis, defeating even the legacies in their own ground in an auction. A fourth-stage magnetic defeating enemies multiple levels above his own. Even surviving and winning an encounter against Alaric. Gabriel Vanderbilt jolted upwards, his chair falling behind him. What? He defeated Alaric. He was in the nascent spirit realm even then. The conglomerates were the one most surprised to hear this. After all, they knew more than anyone just how large the difference between the different realms were. Sure, in their current realms in the 9th stage body formation, they had more confidence in defeating a first-stage nascent spirit cultivator. But even in their wildest of dreams, they would have never thought that they could even stand a chance against a nascent spirit when they were only in the 4th stage. Especially against someone as skilled as Alaric, who was renowned even in the upper echelons. That's unbelievable, Gabriel said, slinking back down into his seat. Why haven't we heard about this back in the upper echelons? It's not that well known even here in New Sparta, Cedric said. If I didn't specifically ask for my information network to search for it, they would have never found it. Just then, one of the sycophants in the room interjected. Don't believe the rumors, Sir Gabriel, Sir Cedric. No amount of talent could make up for the difference in realms. But before he could even say anything else, he was suddenly engulfed in a suffocating aura. Cedric stared at him, his eyes looking indifferent. Are you saying my information network was wrong? No, sir. It's just that. Gabriel waved him off. It's real. The mere mention of the name Reborn made those Metropolitans' eyes widen, as if they're reliving that same moment when they saw the fight right in front of their eyes. If you can't even see that, then maybe you're not worthy of being part of this cohort. The sycophant was utterly humiliated, unable to find the words to get him out of the hole he dug himself into. Being chastised and upbraided by the conglomerates was a death sentence in these social circles. The other people around him turned away from him, as if he had some sort of intractable disease. Mortified, the sycophant could only exit out of the room of his own accord. I would like to meet this Michael person, Gabriel said to Kyo. I guess I'll have to wait until he appears here in the competition. Michael turned to him. He's not. Another Rebornian is going to partake in the competition. Oh. Gabriel thought that the reason Kyo was so confident in the Reborn company winning the competition was because their leader would be personally competing in this tournament. Even the Alaric and the other legacies were surprised. If Michael wasn't going to fight, then who? Then they remembered that Michael had subordinates that also joined the auction. The Dragonborns, as they called them. But they were demi-humans. Even if they had mithril artifacts, that still wouldn't be enough to cross the gap between mortals and magnetics. In fact, that was one of the reasons why the Reborn company wasn't as popular as they should be in New Sparta. Their entire strength relied simply on one man, Michael. Without him, the only thing that their company had going for them were their innovative products. They had the fortunes but not the fangs. Well, we shall see what happens in the archery competition. Looks like the first matchup is currently on their way to the arena. For the first 2 days of the competition, the lower tournament would take place. This meant that the competitors would all be in the 5th stage or lower. And right now, the Gold-Blood Werewolves were up against the Trescian Werewolf tribe. The two chieftains first entered the arena, bowing to each other, before sending in their fighter. Each tribe was only allowed a single archer per game. That player could be substituted in other games, but not during one. The Goldbloods sent out a werewolf archer, while the Trescians sent out a human archer, presumably someone from their alliances. Then, a woman walked up into the arena. Michael's eyes widened. He recognized her. It was none other than Claudia Montgomery, Yuna's aunt. Chapter 967 Lucky Man. Chapter 967 Lucky Man. That's your aunt. What's she doing here? He said, looking at Yuna beside him. Yuna looked at Michael as she stifled a chuckle. Of course she's here. Do you not know anything? My dear friend Kyo, for a historian, you sure truly act clueless most of the time, Jodan said with disappointment. Each battle in the tournament is going to take place in a sanctum. And the only ones able to do that are the Montgomerys. In Michael's defense, he was completely overwhelmed with a lot of things. The ersatz, the antiques, his cell phones, and since this archery competition was going to be led by Chief Lupin, he simply let the werewolves arrange everything for him. And with Shiina there, he knew that he wouldn't have to worry about anything at all. Just listen to what she's going to say, Yuna said. Below the viewing deck, Claudia Montgomery walked in between the two werewolf chieftains. Please present your arbiter, she said. And shortly after, both chieftains looked back at their camp and nodded. A few seconds later, A human walked out from both werewolf camps, both bearing the same attire and emblem on their chest as Claudia. In fact, even though they were on the opposite sides of the competition, they had a lot of facial similarities with one another. Are they Montgomerys? Michael asked. Yes, they are. It seemed that these two chieftains gained an arbiter from our family, Una answered. Claudia gestured to both Montgomerys to come closer. Of course, she knew who they were. They were from the same family, after all. Arbiters, present your sanctums, she said to them. Then, the two Montgomerys began to discuss back and forth about some technical jargon that Michael had no idea about. They were talking about venues, geolocations, gravitational fields, and some other weird eclectic terminology. What are they talking about? He whispered to Una. They're trying to come to a conclusion about what the sanctum is going to look like. Sanctums were private spaces where individuals or groups could fight against each other in a completely controlled environment. Montgomerys could change the sanctum from a tundra, to a desert, to even outer space. They were tasked in creating a space that both parties agreed to fight in. That was why they were called arbiters. I see. So both arbiters are trying to get a location that is beneficial to their side. Una nodded. Yep, exactly. Some say that a competent arbiter is the difference between heaven and hell, Jadan said. Michael watched the two arbiters down below. And even though they were talking amicably amongst each other, he couldn't help but feel as if there was some kind of unseen vocal war that was happening between the two of them. With the way they were proposing and rejecting each other's proposition, it almost looked like they were two lawyers fighting against each other in a court of law. Eventually, though, the two arbiters came to an understanding. They then talked to Claudia about their agreement before they walked back into their camp amongst the werewolves. The sanctum has been decided. The seed will be a mountainous forest with high elevation. The dimensions will be a 2-kilometer radius. She began to list out the exact details, painting a vivid picture to the audience. Their excitement was building. It's a fairly equal environment. Una nodded to herself, her incisive eyes and ears already analyzing the sanctum. Michael turned to her. Aren't sanctums supposed to be equal? It's supposed to be, she said. But there are times when one company has an arbiter, and the other doesn't. Explain. Even though sanctums are a neutral ground, there are some loopholes that companies can take advantage of. For example, let's say that both parties agree to an ice biome sanctum because it wouldn't give any advantage to either party. But if one of those companies has an arbiter, they could recreate the sanctum before the fight and practice their strategies there. Or if a company was unscrupulous, they could secretly add an advantageous cave that their company could hide in. Michael frowned. Won't all features in a sanctum have to be properly discussed, with absolutely no secrecy at all? She nodded. Yes, everything has to be told up front. But if you don't have an arbiter there with you to guide you, you won't know that your opponents are planning something unscrupulous. Montgomerys were like the lawyers of this world. If you go into court without one, then you would basically be feeding yourselves to the dogs. If you sign a contract without a competent lawyer overseeing it, then you may fall victim to a very strict contract without even knowing it. That's why Montgomerys are sought after in every corner of the world. Jadan interjected. Michael stayed silent as he digested this information. Only now did he realize how important arbiters were in sanctum duels. But what about us? He wondered. As far as he knew, Chief Lupin doesn't have any resources to hire an arbiter. You're so clueless sometimes, Una said, chuckling to herself. That's what I asked you about last night. You know, about me being your arbiter. Michael finally remembered. Ah, don't worry. I already contacted Shiina to let her know that I'll be Reborn's official arbiter. Jadan gasped. Wow, Miss Una as your arbiter. Kyo, my friend. You are one lucky man. Una lightly elbowed Michael. That's right, she said. You're lucky to have me. She's the most talented arbiter to come in 1,000 years. Jadan, you exaggerate. No, it's true, Miss Una. Jadan insisted. Your talents are illustrious. Of course, not as much as my dear Aerith, but very, very close. Una laughed. Well, I'm honored. Jadan then turned to Michael. I can't believe I'm friends with you, Kyo. You're gonna make it big with Miss Una here beside you. Some say that she's even more talented than Zir herself. It's only natural that she's going to be the successor of the Montgomery family. Chapter 968 Next Battle. Chapter 968 Next Battle. Michael looked at Una. Wow, what can't you do? He asked her. She was a global celebrity, an extremely talented swordsman, and also the best up-and-coming arbiter in the world. He was lucky to have her. But it seemed that she didn't appreciate his words all that much. She glared at him with an indecipherable look. What? He couldn't see it, but she was wondering if he was being ironic or not. Was he so clueless about himself that he wasn't even aware of his own talents? He was the one who seemed to be able to do anything, with God-given talents the world had never seen before. If there was something that Michael shouldn't feel, then it was jealousy. Look, it's about to start. They all looked down as Claudia raised both of her hands into the air, before curving them downwards to complete a circle. Power emanated out of her body. Ability power. Michael stared at Claudia through his drone, trying to discern what level of cultivation she was. But when his filter appeared and everything turned into either red hot or a cool blue, he was flabbergasted to find nothing but a warm orange in her heart, just like the rest of her body. What am I looking at? At the risk of being discovered, he piloted the drone closer to her, hoping that it would give him clarity. But instead, it only opened up a lot more questions than before. After all, Claudia had no God-forged pieces in her heart. Her hands, which were currently creating the sanctum for the archery battle, was emanating an extremely powerful ability power. Yet, that ability power seemed to come out of nowhere at all. It didn't come from her chest or any part of her body. It seemed to just magically manifest upon her request. He couldn't understand what was happening. Turning to Yuna, he asked her, "You can make a sanctum, right?" She nodded. "Yep." Michael's eyes turned to her chest, using his drone to verify his guess. She also had no God-forged piece. He was so surprised at this discovery that he was completely oblivious to the reddish blush growing in Yuna's face. "Where are you looking?" she said, turning her body away from her with an embarrassed look. You don't have God-forged pieces," he muttered. Slowly, she turned towards him. "Montgomerys don't need one," she said. "But how are you able to create sanctums?" "That's what the training is for. Our family has always been special. We are the only lineage with the ability to tap into ability powers without needing God-forged pieces." This confused Michael greatly. This was changing the very paradigm of his belief at the very moment. Then how? We're like beast folks in that regard. Just like how a werewolf's power is always related to physical strength, our powers are strictly limited to arbitration as well. In order to increase our powers, we only need to practice our craft just like any other skill. Michael turned back to Claudia down at the arena. At this point, her conjuration of the sanctum was finished. There was now a circular hole in the ground, almost as big as the arena itself, leading down into a completely different space. Just like it was discussed, the sanctum was a mountainous forest area. "Miss Yuna, I heard that this power was given to your ancestors by the ancient humans themselves," Jadan said. "That's right. It's an inheritance that was left to us. For quite a while, our unique powers were looked down upon as something merely as an afterthought. It wasn't until my grandmother asserted her dominance in the world did sanctum duels become ubiquitous. If it weren't for her, our family wouldn't even be mentioned anywhere near the conglomerates." Hearing this, Jadan couldn't help but let his eyes dream and wonder. An inheritance. The Montgomerys were able to leverage their inheritance to become a top power in the world. Could the Thunderfoot do that as well? That's what Jadan hoped. He'd do everything he can, but they won't even get the chance if they don't retrieve that key. While Michael and Jadan were observed with their own thoughts, the archery competition was well on their way. The two competitors deployed down into the sanctum, finding themselves strapped with a target on their chest, back, and forelimbs. Whoever hit their enemies on all targets would win the duel. Both immediately hid in the bushes, drawing their bows secretly. The gold-blood archer shot first, its arrow arcing through the skies before hitting his opponent's left leg. The opposing archer let loose his own arrow, hitting his target's right shoulder. The whole Colosseum cheered, finding the battle exciting. Even the conglomerates couldn't help but be impressed. "Sharp eyes. With a better bow, the gold-blood archer can go places," Gabriel casually complimented. "Yes, he's clearly the better of the two. I think he'll be able to reach the semifinals with his skills," Cedric agreed. Meanwhile, Michael wasn't paying much attention to the fight. He was too absorbed with the truth to Montgomery's arbitration powers. Inheritance? Just like the red lamp with the Thunderfoot, and the second antique. It said something about an inheritance as well. "Find it all, inherit it all," it said. Could they be connected? Could the Internet Tesseract also in the same vein as the red lamp and the Montgomery's arbitration powers? "Kyo, did you hear me?" Gabriel asked. "Oh," Michael snapped out of his reverie. "Sorry, I wasn't listening. I was saying that you should start preparing your archer soon. One of these guys could face you in the semifinals. If you advance there, of course." Michael looked down at the sanctum battle. Were they even using the bow properly? "I have full trust in my friend," he said. Just then, a raucous cheering erupted from the crowd. Someone just won. The werewolf archer emerged from the sanctum, only having been hit in both his shoulders. His opponent, on the other hand, was mired with multiple arrows on his body. Claudia walked back up the stadium. Up next, the Brownbloods against the Niveus Pack tribe, Chapter 969 Arrows Lodged. Chapter 969 Arrows Lodged. Everyone turned to look at the arena. Chief Lupin walked up to the stage, with a familiar face facing him on the other side. Lupin, I apologize for this, but I can't give you any mercy for this competition. My allies want that promotion, you see, said the Niveus pack chief. Chief Lupin scoffed. He knew that being competitive was part of the celebrations, but did he have to be so obnoxious about it? He wanted to get mad, but then remembered who he was sending. Smiling, he turned back and gestured for Shiina to approach. I should say that to you, Chief Lupin said to his opponent before leaving the stage. Finally, both archers stood face to face against each other. And instead of tumultuous cheering and excited shouts, the audience in the Colosseum turned uncharacteristically quiet. They mumbled in a confused mess. Who is that? Is she a demi-human? No. There's no way they're sending a demi-human in this competition. Nobody could believe it. The conglomerates, the beastfolk leaders, and everyone else watching the arena could only wonder why the Brown Blood tribe sent out a demi-human. Did they want to lose on purpose? Kyo, are you sure that your company sent out the right person? She's a demi-human. They turned to look at Michael, who simply shrugged in response. So, Gabriel, Cedric, and all the conglomerates looked at him, confused at his indifference. Neytiri furtively glanced at Yuna, trying to see if she knew what was happening. But Yuna simply winked at her with a mysterious smile on her face. Only Michael and Yuna believed that this was the right choice. Claudia looked at the two fighters, before looking up at the stadium, her eyes resting on Yuna and the lion-masked youth next to her. Both fighters are ready. Please send out your arbiters. The Niveus pack stayed still. They had an arbiter but chose not to use it. They didn't think they needed to a clear belittlement of the Brownbloods. They choose to abstain their right to an arbiter. Brownbloods. Back at the viewing room, Gabriel and the other conglomerates looked at Yuna. She was clearly an ally of Reborn and by association, the Brownbloods. They even heard her saying that she'd be their arbiter. But instead, Yuna shook her head. It's all right. She doesn't need my help. Her words confused everyone even more. Their company was clearly at a disadvantage after only sending out a demi-human. Why would they not use an arbiter to equal it out? Miss Yuna. Kyo, what are you both doing? Jadon asked hurriedly. The Niveus pack are pretty good at. Michael forcibly shut him up. Just look, he said. With both competitors abstaining from using an arbiter, the sanctum will be made in a completely random seed, Claudia announced. Within a second, she created a separate space containing a relatively flat plain with many rock outcroppings popping out here and there with various heights. Facing the sanctum, Shiina readied herself. Though to others, she didn't look ready. She didn't even have her weapon ready. I suggest you ready a medic, said her opponent. She smiled back at him. We will. We wouldn't want you to accidentally die, would we? Without waiting for a response, Shiina jumped into the sanctum, angering her opponent as he jumped after her. Now with both participants in the sanctum, the battle commenced. Still incensed, the Niveus archer immediately manifested his diva, showing a mighty eagle with floating feathers around him. Drawing his bow, he released his shot into the open sky. Ability power emanated out of his chest, empowering the arrow. Meanwhile, Shiina found purchase in a tall outcropping overlooking the entire battlefield. A good vantage point, but a bad spot. The arrows found their target immediately. Hundreds of eagle feathers manifested in the air alongside the arrow, each becoming as fast as the eagle itself. It dove down towards Shiina, its speed almost breaking the speed barrier. Despite the perilous situation, Shiina simply took a deep breath and retrieved her bow from her shadow. She looked down at the battlefield, her eyes focusing on her opponent. And for a second, the Niveus archer felt a chill on his back. Something's looking at him. From all sides. But it didn't matter. His arrows were about to hit its target. The demi-human had no chance to escape. This was what others thought as well. The audience disappointedly sighed, some already collecting the bets they placed. The Brownbloods were never the favorites. They were dead last. But just then, something impossible happened. Shiina drew her bow and fired. At that very moment, a small white dragon manifested above her head. It shouted a muted screech, before disappearing into mist. Gabriel, Cedric, and the other conglomerates immediately jumped out of their seats, startled by what they seemed to see. Then, the Niveus archer's arrow finally reached their destination. They rained down on Shiina. She didn't give it heed. She didn't turn to look at it before moving her head slightly, letting the arrow fly past her. Out of the hundreds of arrows, none hit her. And before the Niveus archer could even wonder how that was even possible, he felt a stinging pain in his body. Multiple ones. He looked down. Arrows pierced his shoulders, his torso, his back, and his thighs. They were lodged perfectly in the center. Bullseye. His knees gave in, dropping into the ground, before the sanctum pulled him out of the space, transporting him back into the arena. He looked down into the ground, confusion written on his face. He lost? Just like that? Even his tribe couldn't understand what happened. They stood there, gawking at their unexpected loss. How did he get hit? They didn't even see an arrow. In fact, most of the audience had no idea what truly transpired. Just when they thought the demi-human would lose, the exact opposite happened. She emerged untouched, while the clear favorite returned with arrows lodged in his body. But the more perceptive ones, the ones who were stronger, they knew what happened. Gabriel, Cedric, and the conglomerates had their jaws on the ground, shocked and shaken to the core. Chapter 970 Demi-Human Magnetic. Chapter 970 Demi-Human Magnetic. It was just a brief moment. A world-breaking moment. But at the moment that the demi-human released her grip on the arrow, a diva seemed to form above her head, taking the shape of what seemed to be a white juvenile dragon. Was it real? Gabriel and the others didn't know. They weren't exactly paying attention when the exact moment happened. They were only alerted by the sudden, but subtle explosion of ability power coming from the demi-human. The fact was clear. Shiina won against her opponent. Are my eyes deceiving me? Gabriel muttered, his eyes still focused on Shiina. It's not. I saw it too, Cedric said, his eyes furrowed. The diva that they saw was undeniable. However, they were still having a lot of trouble reconciling what they saw versus what was possible. Did a demi-human really become a magnetic? The alternative was just as bad. If she wasn't a magnetic, then it would mean that a mortal was able to defeat a magnetic. They didn't know which one was worse. It's a diva. Now, if Shiina had simply used ability power like that of beastfolks, then one may even mistake her for a draconian. But no. The manifestation of her power came exactly from the diva that briefly appeared above her head. Just like that of humans. This is impossible, Neytiri muttered. A demi-human can never be a magnetic. Their hearts can't take it. We have a whole war that proves that. At this very moment, the whole Colosseum was embroiled in furious discussions. They didn't know what happened, and those that offered explanations were either chastised or disproven. Did they cheat? How did that archer lose? She didn't. I didn't know how she did that, but she didn't cheat. Then how do you explain a demi-human beating a magnetic? No explanation could explain Shina's victory. What happened? One of the werewolf chieftains muttered. A demi-human wielding the powers of humans? Impossible. No kind of magic can explain that. Has someone discovered how to finally turn a demi-human into a magnetic? Asked one of the wizards from the Guild of Arcana. Her bow. That's not normal. A mithril artifact. Better designed than any bow we have in the world. It would even give her a run for her money, said one of the knights from the order. Yuna, your boyfriend truly is one of a kind, Claudia muttered under her breath in disbelief. She saw it more clearly than anyone else, but even she had to double-check her eyes. It happened so fast that only a few people were able to see it happen in real time and actually comprehend what they were seeing. And it just so happened that those people were the leaders of companies, organizations, and tribes. News of this would quickly spread everywhere. Everywhere. Meanwhile, Chief Lupin had a smug look on his face as he welcomed Shiina back from her triumphant victory. Well done, Miss Shiina. For Reborn, she replied with a smile. The werewolf chief nodded excitedly. Yes, for Reborn. Then he shot a look at his opposing chieftain. The Niveus pack were still frozen in shock, unable to accept their brisk defeat. Haha. Serves you right. Meanwhile, Neytiri couldn't handle her curiosity and immediately turned to Yuna. Who was that? Yuna teasingly shrugged. That's one of Michael's closest allies. Shiina. I don't mean that. I mean, how does she have a diva? I don't know. Last I saw her, she didn't have that kind of power. But that's just Michael. He's always finding ways to make the impossible possible. Neytiri stared at her. Really? Michael did that? Yup. He's special, Yuna said, her feet furtively nudging Michael beside her. After hearing those compliments, Michael couldn't help but awkwardly rub his hair. Meanwhile, this revelation sent a myriad of reactions from the conglomerates and everybody else in the room. It seemed that the rumors about him were all but exaggerated. In fact, it may even be lacking. The fact that he was able to find a way to turn one of his demi-human companions into a magnetic meant that he was able to accomplish something no one in history has ever done before. His reputation within this social circle deepened. The mystery behind him grew ever more tenebrous. Who was this guy? Everybody was curious. Of course, they didn't know that he was only a few feet away from them. Soon, the archery competition continued. By the end, half of the tribes were eliminated and half went on to the next round. And surprisingly, The second favorite tribe ended up drawing the short straw and fought against the conglomerates. The result went as expected. The Thalassic tribe were eliminated in the first round. Eventually, the second round commenced and the brown-blood werewolves found their next opponent. The Fanged Moon. They were regarded as the strongest werewolf tribe in all the lands, faster, smarter, and wiser than the rest. Against the Fanged Moon, the Brownbloods won't be lucky a second time. Surely, they won't be fighting against someone who was caught off guard. The Fanged Moon will be ready for any shenanigans they try. I lost my bets last time, so I'll double down on this to earn it back. While the clueless spectators were already deciding on the outcome of this fight, the more perceptive people instead turned to observe Shiina with a lot more scrutiny. Did they really see a diva? Or was it all an illusion? This fight would decide it. Claudia invited both archers to the stage, with Shiina facing off against a female werewolf. Arbiters, to the stage. Yuna got out of her seat and stretched. Looks like it's my time, she said, before jumping down the ledge of the viewing deck, falling down tens of meters in height and landing squarely on the stage. Hey, Shiina. Hello, Miss Yuna. I'll be relying on your help. The appearance of the famous granddaughter of Zir Montgomery sent another wave of shock throughout the Colosseum. Yuna Montgomery? She's allied with the Brownbloods. No, it looks like she's friends with that demi-human. Is she allied with the Reborn company? How did they land her? Last I heard, she was being primed to be the Montgomery family's successor. Yuna's appearance certainly solidified something in everyone's eyes. Reborn wasn't as simple as they thought. The werewolf chiefs that were disregarding the Brownbloods' choice of allies were quickly being proven wrong. If it led to them being arbitrated by Zir's prized granddaughter, then it may have been the greatest decision Chief Lupin could have made. Discuss your sanctum, Claudia instructed the two arbiters. Yuna and her very distant cousin faced each other, before they began to speak technical jargon that 99% of people couldn't understand. Yuna's words were fast, acerbic. Her opponent was hurried as he tried to catch up to her. And when he tried to insert a slight advantage for his archer in the contract, Yuna immediately shot it down and replied with her own attack. And even though they were merely exchanging words, the opposing arbiter felt as if he had just ran a marathon. He was exhausted, sweat pouring from his forehead. I concede to your propositions, the arbiter said begrudgingly. He could only look back at the Fanged Moon camp and shake his head in disappointment. He'd been instructed to make the sanctum as favorable to them as possible, making sure the demi-human couldn't repeat that miracle from before. The Fanged Moon spent a lot of money to hire him, as he specialized in those kinds of lawyering maneuvers. Yet, against the famed Yuna, he couldn't even get a single win against her. In the end, the sanctum they chose was a simple arena with hay bales constructed as walls and ramparts. Yuna then turned to Shiina. I did as you asked. A simple sanctum. Thank you, Miss Yuna. That place will do nicely. You know, I could have made the sanctum a lot more favorable to you. Shiina shook her head. There's no need to, Miss Shiina. This archery competition is my chance to show the world how beautiful our company is. I don't want to give them any excuses. Yuna nodded. All right, good luck. And with that, the battle commenced. Both fighters jumped into the sanctum, finding themselves enclosed into an arena as big as the one in the Colosseum. The werewolf archer didn't waste any time. She vaulted over the hay bales and rushed towards Shiina. She wasn't going to make the same mistake as her opponent the last time. A growl escaped from her mouth. Her muscles bulged. Fur grew out of her skin. Halfway towards Shiina, her opponent turned into a full werewolf. As a female, her form was much smaller, more slender than males. She was weaker than them. Her speed, agility, and finesse made up for that. She lunged towards Shiina. She wasn't going to use her bow. She was going to bite her with it. Chapter 971 Unavoidable. Chapter 971 Unavoidable. A werewolf with a power equivalent to a third-stage magnetic, Gabriel muttered. This isn't going to be easy. His opinions mirrored that of the other people interested in seeing another miracle happen before their very eyes. In fact, the only way for the demi-human to survive against this first assault is if she had an ability power of her own. Just as they were thinking that, the werewolf charged through a hay bale, sending flakes flying everywhere. It obscured the whole battlefield, the whole giant body of the werewolf seemingly disappearing in the meanwhile. She could appear from anywhere. Shiina held the darkwood in her bow taut, keeping her aim steady forwards. Then, she whipped her bow to the left, releasing an ability-powered arrow flying through the cascading flakes of bale. Suddenly, a werewolf's hand swiped the arrow away, sending it ricocheting to the ground. The werewolf frowned, unable to understand how she was seen. And just as she was trying to figure that out, another arrow homed in on her body, forcing her to back away. Gar, you were lucky, the werewolf growled. This time, I shall let you see the powers endowed by the moon. With all four of her limbs squarely on the ground, the werewolf arched her back like a stretching cat. And in that moment, ability power coursed through her muscular system. The ground cracked underneath her paws. Power began to gather in her body, her potential energy growing with each second like stretched rubber. And it was at that moment that Shiina and everyone else realized why the werewolf was put into this competition despite not using any bows. She was the bow. Just then, the stretching werewolf suddenly disappeared from everyone's eyes. A shockwave followed behind soon after, sending more hay flakes into the air. The werewolf's body turned into the arrow itself, her sharp nails acting as the tip. With ability power coursing through the werewolf's body, her speed exceeds that of reality. It ascended into something more. The werewolf zipped through the entire sanctum, slicing everything in its path. It followed a non-geometrical trail, disregarding the change in momentum needed for the multiple quick change in directions she performed in the span of a few seconds. More hay bales exploded into flakes. The intended walls and maze structures were destroyed, turning the whole sanctum into a flat plain. Shiina remained in the middle, unprotected, with nowhere to hide. The werewolf turned for the final time, now its trajectory aimed at the clueless demi-human. Her figure blurred, turning invisible as the wind itself, the flaking hay obscuring her from any point of view. But at that same moment, Shiina raised her bow once again, drawing another arrow. The werewolf frowned. Was she seen? No, impossible. She continued her frontal assault, making a detour just to be safe. She reappeared on the other side, her frontal paws now targeting Shiina's back. Her body spinning, the werewolf shot towards Shiina. Shiina's drawstring grew taut. Small golden lights appeared above her head, revolving, as it formed the image of a juvenile white dragon. It opened its maws, screaming. No, yawning. Then, it whipped its head towards the spinning werewolf. Their eyes met. The werewolf felt her heart get shaken. It was unnerving. That juvenile dragon felt larger than it was, like an omniscient being watching down from above. But her attack couldn't be stopped now. She committed even further as she spiraled towards Shiina. Her physical body reappeared into reality, her claws just mere inches away from Shiina's back. Just then, the werewolf felt a stinging pain on her side. An unknown force had struck her, its momentum seemingly enough to throw her off her course. The werewolf's limbs missed Shiina by just a few inches. She crashed, skidding multiple meters across the ground and creating a trench almost a meter deep. She tumbled into the arena's wall with a thud, hay flakes landing on her fur. Aching, confused, and bleeding, the werewolf awkwardly got to her feet and looked around warily. Her fur was spiked, like a spooked cat. It didn't know what happened. How could she have missed? Then that stinging pain appeared again. She looked down. An arrow had pierced through her left shoulder, straight into the bullseye. She was hit. She looked back at the white demi-human. Shiina remained standing in her place, the compound bow at the end of its rotation after seemingly having shot an arrow. The werewolf didn't even see her shoot the arrow. Perhaps, during the heat of the moment, she did hear a slight twang of a string as it released an arrow. But Shiina was aiming at nothing but the air. The werewolf was behind her. There was no way that the arrow could have hit her. Disgruntled, injured, and embarrassed, the werewolf shivered, brushing off her nerves. That was just lucky. A werewolf's physical strength could never lose. This time she was going to see how she did that. The werewolf arched her back again, building up the power in her limbs before she shot off back into the air. As she blurred into the air, zigzagging to obscure her trail, the werewolf kept her eyes on Shiina. She observed the moment the demi-human reloaded an arrow into her bow and drew its string taut. She could see every one of her moves in crystal clear clarity. Then the white dragon whipped its head towards her. Its eyes were playful and blithe, yet it sent shivers down the werewolf's spine. The demi-human released her arrow. It was unremarkable. Nothing special. A simple wooden projectile. Fast speed, but nothing she couldn't handle. And most of all, its trajectory missed her by a good mile. There was no way it was going to hit her. But a few milliseconds after its release, the arrow disappeared. Then, she felt a piercing pain, throwing her off her kilter. She crashed into the ground, limping, as the arrow seemed to have found its way to her leg. Chapter 972 Drowning in Offers. Chapter 972 Drowning in Offers. The whole Colosseum was drowned in complete silence. Gasps and shocked breaths broke the stillness here and there. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. The Fanged Moon werewolf, the one famed for their absolute physical strength, was now limping with 2 arrows lodged in their body. The second most favorite tribe losing against the conglomerates was sudden, but not unexpected. But this was a complete upset. In the recent history of the lunar celebrations, the Fanged Moon had never placed lower than 3rd place. They excelled in every category, So much so that many thought that the format for the lunar celebrations were only made so that the Fanged Moon could showcase their versatile talents. Now, they looked like they were on the verge of exiting the tournament only in the second round. But even this unexpected development was not as mind-breaking as the one seen above China's head. A juvenile white dragon. A diva. Now, it was no longer a wisp of an image that disappeared within moments of its appearance. It displayed all of its valor and brilliance for all to see. The white scales on the dragon seemed to be enough to blind people staring at it for too long. A diva? On a demi-human. How is that possible? Are we sure she isn't a human? Or a beast folk? But no matter how much they tried to deny it, the fact was displayed right in front of them. To doubt it is to doubt their own eyes. Meanwhile, to the other conglomerates, this only confirmed their previous guesses. She truly was the first verified case of a demi-human awakening a diva. Her existence alone was destroying previous known paradigms about magnetics. She not only proved demi-human magnetics were possible, but could go toe-to-toe against beast folks of the same level. The werewolf was in the third stage, and from what Gabriel and the others saw, it looked like Shiina was in the same realm of cultivation. What's impressive was that Shiina proved herself dominant even against those already considered as geniuses. Back in the sanctum, the werewolf ignored the injuries in its limbs and continued to attack Shiina. But it proved futile. With each draw of her bow, Shiina calmly shot an arrow and hit her target with a 100% accuracy. The werewolf zipped through the sanctum at the fastest speeds she could muster, taking routes completely randomly. Yet, the arrows seemed to find her body without any problem. 1 second they were flying straight in the air, and in the next it magically lodged itself in the werewolf's body. 1, 2, 3, 4. With 4 more arrows, Shiina quickly made work of her opponent and hit all her targets. Efficient and deadly accurate. The werewolf stumbled forwards as the sanctum pulled her out of the space and back into the Colosseum stage. Winner! The Brown Blood Tribe, Claudia announced. It was only after those words were uttered did the crowd finally erupt in raucous cheering. They were celebrating this momentous occasion. When else would they witness a demi-human magnetic beating a beastfolk with such ease and composure? Shiina didn't even take a step away from her original position. She simply drew her bow, shot her arrows and won. Simple. But of course, the more perceptive spectators knew that it was anything but simple. Everyone knew that aiming was the hardest part about shooting a bow, especially against a werewolf whose speed exceeded that of an arrow twice over. But Shina's ability power seemed to completely ignore that fact and skip that entirely. What a terrifying power, Gabriel said, slinking back into his chair. Truly a dark horse if I've ever seen one, Cedric agreed. It seemed that Kyo's prediction of the Brownbloods winning the whole thing wasn't an exaggeration at all. Shiina proved herself competent enough to be in the running for the top spot. I knew Shiina was strong, but that's just on a whole other level, Yuna muttered. Of course, Michael wasn't surprised. Shina's ability power allowed her to hit anything she sets her sights onto. The fight was over from the beginning. Once the fight was over, the other tribes went on to battle it out to the next round. But as expected, nothing was quite as exciting or surprising as Shina's fight. Even when the conglomerate's representatives asserted their dominance, people were still stuck to discussing what they saw during the previous fight. In their defense, seeing a demi-human wield a diva was pretty unforgettable. It made such an impression on everybody that there were lots of people now trying to introduce themselves to Shiina. The Greenstone Patriarch wishes for your presence. We would be delighted to have you over for dinner and discuss some business. Please take this quiver containing 100 diamond-tipped arrows. Think of it as an advance for a potential alliance with our company and your esteemed presence. In fact, even the other werewolf tribes were trying to recruit Shiina over to their side. Growling, "Get out of here!" Chief Lupin shooed them away immediately. The gall! They were making fun of him only this morning. And now when they finally realized Shiina's worth, they came crawling over towards them. But that was just how amazing Shiina was. Even the Order of the Heavenly Knights came over and asked for Shiina's presence. Salute! I hail from the way of the shooter. We would like to formally invite you to become part of the Order, said the knight, kneeling. And after seeing an official edict scroll, even Chief Lupin felt awkward shooing them away. I have no interest, thank you. Shiina said it nicely but decisively. She quickly turned away, flustering the knight. I came with an invitation from a heavenly knight herself. You are assured mentorship and guidance in the way of the shooter, the knight said hurriedly. And this time Chief Lupin couldn't hold his surprise. A personal mentorship from a heavenly knight? No thanks, Shiina replied with a smile on her face. Chief Lupin was flabbergasted. Did she know she was turning down an offer of a lifetime? Chapter 973 First Day Done. Chapter 973 First Day Done. Meanwhile, back in the viewing deck, even Kyo wasn't immune to being swarmed with requests. The conglomerates all wished to converse with Shiina. Of course, they weren't so bold as to ask her to leave Reborn and be with them instead. However, they did say that they really wanted to meet with Shiina, if not for creating a favorable connection with her, then simply to talk about how her powers came to be. Michael could easily fulfill their requests, of course. But there was no incentive for him to do so. So, he just went under the guise of Kyo not being influential enough in the Reborn company as an excuse to decline them. Miss Shiina is busy with her preparations for the tournament, and I don't want to disturb her. Maybe I'll relay your requests after. The conglomerates back off immediately. I see. I'll be looking forward to meeting with the Reborn company after this tournament, Gabriel said. Sure. But I think that you'll be waiting in a long line. They don't really differentiate between conglomerates and other companies, you know. Gabriel and the other four next to him awkwardly squirmed in their seats. Is that so? Well, what should we do to distinguish ourselves amongst the others? Gabriel asked. Well, a tribute or a gift wouldn't hurt, Michael suggested nonchalantly. If it weren't for his mask, people would have seen the sly look on his face. What kind of tribute? Would rare artifacts or opulent treasures be enough? Michael considered it for a second before shaking his head. You know what, I think it would be better if you give them something more practical. $100 could be good. He didn't know if this obvious way of suggestion would work on these guys, but thankfully, they were blissfully ignorant about money like all Nepo babies were. I see, Gabriel said. Then I shall keep that in mind. Cedric then whispered to Gabriel. How much are you planning to give? $500,000? Gabriel answered. What was that? Are you planning on giving more so that they would give you priority? You sly dog. Now I'm planning to give 600,000. Michael watched on with an amused expression on his face. After all, it wasn't just the conglomerates who were falling for his scheme. The other companies eavesdropping on Gabriel's conversation also ended up thinking about offering $100 gifts to Reborn in the hopes of getting an audience with Shiina. This tournament ended up being more profitable than he thought. As the bright sun traveled across the skies and hid into the horizon, the first day of the archery tournament soon wound down to a close. The first 2 rounds were done. Out of the 16 teams that competed, only 4 were left in contention. 2 of those teams were from the conglomerates, one hailing from the Hephaestus Company and the other from the Goldstone Company. Meanwhile, the other 2 werewolf tribes that remained were also names that were completely unexpected. One was, of course, the Brownblood tribe. They came out of nowhere, destroying everyone's predictions, and came out on top despite the odds stacked against them. The other was the F-Tail tribe, who by pure luck of the draw, ended up facing opponents who were quite easy compared to the others. They didn't have to face the tournament favorites, thanks to a certain demi-human dark horse or white horse. Rather, nor did they have to face the 2 conglomerate representatives. And it seemed that their luck wouldn't end there. As the night came, the leader of the 4 teams gathered and discussed the bracket for tomorrow's last 2 battles. And even with Chief Lupin praying to the moon above him, he ended up with the worst-case scenario. The rounds are decided, said Claudia. The Brownbloods are going to be facing the Hephaestus Company. Chief Lupin almost fell to his knees. How could this happen? He hoped that their team would get to fight against the F-Tail tribe and let the 2 conglomerate representatives fight against each other. But in the end, they were the ones who drew the short straw. It was clear from the start of the tournament alone that the incisive archer from the Hephaestus clan was the strongest competitor by a long shot. First of all, he was in the 5th stage of body formation, and second of all, there was nothing lacking in his arsenal. He had the skill, the beautifully crafted weapon, and the resources to triumph against all of his opponents here. Chief Lupin knew that Shiina was strong, but fighting against someone 2 stages higher was a near Herculean task, especially against someone from a conglomerate, no less. This is stressful, Chief Lupin muttered to himself, and compared to the worrisome expression on his face, the Rebornians didn't seem to mind the competition at all. They remained as unbothered as they were before. As the tournament came to a close and as people began to leave the Colosseum, a small gathering of elite leaders and owners reunited in an undisclosed location. The people invited to this assembly were the big-shot beastfolk leaders like the tribe chieftains, the royal blood vampires, the mermen, etc. In short, these were the people who were in the soiree last night, the soiree meant for the older folks. But this time, even Gabriel and the other conglomerates were invited to take part in the meeting. One of the werewolf chieftains quaffed a glass of alcohol. What are we here for? Thunderfoot Patriarch. I hope this is important. In front of this gathering stood a short and stout man, thick bushy beard, and muscles that seemed to burst out of his clothes. He was the Thunderfoot Patriarch, Jatun's father. I'm here for a simple request, he said. Is it because of the robbery? Cedric interjected. Despite the rudeness of the question, the Thunderfoot Patriarch humbly nodded. I knew it wouldn't escape your ears. Yes. It is about the travesty that occurred on our grounds. I need all of your help in retrieving it. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.